everybody.
How are you two doing?
Great. How are you?
Good.
Good, good. Kim, you have a new background. It's bright.
Oh, I've had it for a while.
Have you? Have you?
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah, I'm gonna side eye you if you I've had it for about 2 years now.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, while I'm killing time here, I'm just gonna wait a few minutes. I don't know how many people are gonna show. This is the first time I've done one of these. But I thought that I would tell you how I put together this proposal because he used a whole bunch of AI, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Um, I was going to put together this presentation, and I knew I wanted to talk about the kind of things that I talk to fractionals and consultants about often. So I record most of my calls on Fathom, which has a transcript. So I jumped into Fathom, and after jumping through a bunch of hoops, let's see here, requesting, you know what, I'm going to have a recording for everybody later if they want. So I'm actually going to decline the note takers for now. Anyway, I did a dump of 700 conversations that I'd had with different consultants over the last couple of years. And I dumped it into AI and I said, if you had to pick three common topics that I talked about most, what are they? And it came back and it said, oh, well, you talk about this, that, and the other thing. And I said, okay, cool. So write me an outline for three different presentations about these things. And it did that. And then I said, put together a slide deck for me for these. And it did that. And I tweaked it a bunch. But what was interesting to me and what I was super happy about was that it's my content. This isn't like some weird AI fever dream. Hey, make me up some information. This was like, hey, Lincoln, this was like me talking back to me. Super cool and creepy and weird and fun. So that's where this came up with. But we don't have a ton of time. So I'm just going to keep putting people in as they get here. But I'm going to jump in now. So thank you for coming. I'm experimenting on you. This is my first attempt at doing webinar-y, seminar, workshop-y things. And most of you probably are here because of an email I sent out. Everybody should be people that I've met with in the last couple of years. The philosophy of networking and not selling directly is something I probably talked to most of you about. So I'm not anticipating there's going to be a lot of pushback here. I would think probably most people on this call already like that philosophy. So the intent in this half hour is to reinforce that and remind you of why you love that idea and maybe give you added ammunition to keep at it. Now, I am planning on doing three different talks. So the next one will be reviewing specific tactics about how I implement networking as a strategy. And then the last one is specifically about networking with C-level people, which I've done a lot of. So that's what's happening here. Let me see here. I already shared my screen. Can you guys see my screen over here?
Not yet.
No.
You cannot. Okay, hold on. I shared and unshared multiple times while I was prepping. So, dun, 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 dun. Now do you see it?
Now we see it.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So yeah, this is AI. I did not create this slide deck. I don't like slide decks very much. So I don't make them and I'm not any good at making them. But AI used it, did it for me. I don't remember. This was Notebook LM that did this, by the way. And let's jump into this. So there we go. That's the one I wanted. In general, the illusion, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I want to cover this anyway. The illusion is that, and it's a known sales thing. People say, well, you're not going to sell anything unless you actually tell them. You have to ask for the business. You have to ask for the sale. And that's true for some stuff. I think for consultants and fractionals, it's not how it's done. So the go-to idea for lead gen of doing sales calls, getting appointment setters, running ads, sending out cold emails, none of that, number one, none of you actually want to do that. Everybody hates the idea of any of that stuff. But number two, conveniently, it's not actually how consultants or fractionals are hired pretty much ever. I mean, think about every client you've ever gotten, talk to your friends and neighbors, other consultants and fractionals, ask them where did they get their best clients, and they're all going to tell you it's referrals and introductions. So you can breathe deep and relax into the idea that you don't actually have to be a salesman to do this. Now there are, and I'll get into this later, there are aspects of salespersonship that definitely will help you, especially as you advance past the initial conversation point, and we'll talk about that. But in general, the idea here is to network, help people learn, and don't try to sell. And I'll tell you why. Plays to your strengths. So most of us fractionals and consultants, we're excellent at what we do. We're total pros at whatever, HR or IT or whatever it is that we do. But most of us are not entrepreneurial. Most of us do not have a background in sales and marketing. And so the idea of reaching out and doing sales stuff just does not in any way play to our strengths. Whereas networking does. Networking can go out, especially when you frame up the conversation right, and you can talk about all the stuff you actually know something about and learn from them and help, and you don't have to worry about selling. The timing is always better for networking than it is for traditional sales. Traditional sales, you're kind of relying on someone already looking for what you're selling. Where with networking, in an ideal situation, and I've done this a bunch, in an ideal situation, you're talking to people before they've really fully formed the idea of what their need is. And you're talking to them and you're helping them, and they're thinking, I know I'm going to need somebody kind of like this eventually, but I haven't really figured out why. Well, that's like the perfect time for you to talk to them. So that's another one here. That's why I said the timing is better usually. The psychology of it. So the way I frame up these conversations, typically what I'll do is I'll spend the half hour or whatever time I have with them talking, learning, helping. And then at the end of the call, I will ask for a referral, and I still won't pitch to them. And what that does, I would say for me personally, doing this for my own fractional business, I'd say when I say, I'll come to the end, I'll say, hey, yeah, by the way, this is what I do. I'm a marketing consultant. I work with blah, blah, blah. And these are the kind of results I usually get. And do you know someone like that I might be able to help? So that's the closer. If there's one takeaway from this whole call, it's that. That's what you should do at the end of every networking conversation. But what happens is when you ask that question, about half the time, people will want to give you someone, but they won't think of someone off the top of their head, which is fine. That happens. But then there's another, let's say, 45% of the time where they'll give you someone, or they'll say, I'm meeting with somebody next week and they might have some kind of I might be able to do an introduction. And so that's wonderful. But that leaves us this juicy 5% left, which are the ones where they will raise their hand and they'll say, I don't have someone to give you, but I might need your services. And then you never pitched them, and it was their idea. And as a matter of fact, they'll usually come to you and they'll say, it'll sound like this. It'll be like, I've got this project coming up, and do you do this kind of stuff? I mean, do you have time in your schedule? I mean, like, it's almost apologetic when they bring it to you, which is just awesome. And it's their idea, which is what you want. And then once they do that, okay, all the rules about not selling go straight out the door because they just asked you to sell to them. The last part about this in this quadrant here is asset. And I would say building a real network is something with equity. It's buying, not renting. All of these other different things that I had on our list over here, sales calls and appointment setting and running ads and cold emails, that's all of those are closer to renting, where you put out your effort and hopefully you get something back. But there's not a lot of equity that gets built into it. Whereas as you build throughout your career, this network, you will be able to go back to it over and over and over. You will become a resource for them. They become a resource for you. So I really do think until you're ready to retire, having a strategy to work on your network to grow it on an ongoing basis is very, very wise. So what else do we have here? So in order for it to work, though, it has to be authentic. Easy to say. Depends on who you are. Can be hard to do, I guess. For me, the main important thing is to have in my mind that the person I'm reaching out to is not a prospect. They could turn into one, but I really have to own ahead of time. This person, I am not going to sell to this person. They are not a prospect unless they raise their hand. I want to make sure that I don't have anybody waiting in the waiting room here. Oh, I do. Hold on. Admit all. Sorry if you were waiting. Joining. Sorry, 3 of you I had in the waiting room. Authenticity. There you have it. I'm being authentic right now. So the important part for me is to really own that I'm not going to try to sell to anybody in these networking calls. And my goal is truly to find some way where I can help them on the spot. Like not help them like, hey, I'm showing you how valuable I am, so then you'll hire me. No, like how can I help them and give them something actionable right now that is usable, that has value to them. And where they can leave the call. The judgment when you're done with the call, if it was a good call or not, is not, did they give you a referral? It's not, did you get business? For me, it's really easy for me to have a good call. Almost all my calls are good because I grade my calls based on, do I think when the other person hung up that they were glad they took the call? Like, was it worthwhile to them? Did they gain something? If they did, well then cool. And the beautiful part is they already hung up and I get to decide whether it was a good call or not. So like I said, I think they all go good. But that's really the most important thing about the authenticity for me, is trying to give as much as I can. Now, you do have to be a little bit careful with that because in order to be helpful, you do sometimes ask probing questions. Like as a marketing person, I might say, well, what kind of marketing challenges do you have right now? And if you do that wrong, it can sound like you're just asking them that so you can sell them the solution. So again, you need to be a little careful with that. But I generally try to set the table for the conversation so it's a marketing oriented conversation, because that's frankly where I'm going to be able to help them the most. Okay, another thing I'm going to mention here, and these all kind of blend together. This is what our wonderful AI creator of these slides came up with, which is, I mean, I like it, but transactional. A lot of times when people think about strategic networking, the first thing that comes to mind are these networking groups where like you show up in the group and everybody has to have 2 leads they're giving, and it's very, very transactional. And there's a place for that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but it's not where I feel like the best networking happens. I feel like the best networking, it's like there's 2 different kinds of trust. There is a transactional trust. I mean, like as consultants, everything we do is transactional, right? They're paying us for our time and we're giving them our services. So that is transactional and they trust us to do that and we trust them to pay us. But the kind of trust that is required to get referrals and recommendations, I feel like is a higher level to achieve. So anything to me that smells transactional, I generally try to avoid. I'm not talking about those groups. Those groups are fine. If that works for you, fantastic. But in a call, I don't ever want someone to get the feeling that like I'm only helping them so they'll help me, because that is distinctly inauthentic. But bait and switch is kind of a no-brainer. When you get on a call with somebody, and again, I'm framing this up as Zoom calls because frankly, that's what I'm mostly doing, but this applies to in-person networking as well. But when you get on a call to somebody new, frankly, they're rolling the dice. They are investing their time and they had decided ahead of time whether they thought you were hopefully worthy of their time. So it was a gamble for them. So if you not only did you basically lie to them when you get into the call and pitch, but they just lost their gamble. And it means if the actual goal is to get referrals and introductions, you would never refer someone who just lied to you and then bait and switched you. I mean, so if you really believe that your goal is to get these referrals and introductions, well, then when you're in the call with this person, you need to be someone that they'd be willing to give the introduction to. What else did I have here? Set the table. So I mentioned that earlier in passing. So that has to do with things that happen before you get in the call. But just as a preview, I'll say, typically I try to kickstart a conversation that is related to my area of expertise. So that way, again, no bait and switch because we started out the conversation before the networking call in something that was related to my area of expertise. So we're just continuing down that path. Let's see what we have here next. Okay, so this is the part where I get to find out if anybody else is going to say anything. So I just talked about authenticity. Does anybody have some input about their experience or like or dislike for networking authenticity, or what makes networking authentic to you or inauthentic? Or you could just leave me hanging here. I can hear somebody laughing.
Yeah, that was me.
I'll help you out, Brian.
Okay.
You and I had spoken a few months back, and I'm aligned to your perspective of genuinely showing that you're interested to help and assist, to solve problems, to enhance, to grow, to mature, and leaving out any kind of quid pro quo or any I'm searching for business. Could we work out a deal? It's just saying simply, I'm here to help. And one of the things that I often say is, I like solving puzzles. I like figuring things out. That is fun to me. And if you've got some fun things for me to do, I'm here to assist. And I sort of put it out there in that way, and it tends to resonate with people, I've found.
I agree. I would say the one caution I would say about that is that there still was interwoven in what you just said a little bit of a pitch, because you're saying, I would like you to hire me to solve this problem. So again, nothing wrong with that, but I would say even more, I would love to solve a problem for you right now. But yeah, no, you're totally, yeah, dead on.
I would also say to be careful using the word problem, because I couldn't even count the number of founders and executives I've spoken to who can't acknowledge they have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So puzzle is better, right? Because it doesn't have a negative connotation.
Challenge,
it has more
maybe.
of a challenge. I like challenge a lot.
Yeah.
I just the other day I talked to somebody and I inadvertently said something about helping them with a problem, and he said, "Oh, we don't have any problems."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I just had to not continue talking because I put myself in a corner.
The other thing with that is, of course, again, we're all consultants here. Nobody thinks they've got strategic level issues. They always think, I've got this little tactical problem. Oh, I've got this little whatever. And then it's our job as a consultant to acknowledge that and to say, yes, we can help you with that. And then backstep to what the actual strategic issue is. I've got a bunch more slides, so I appreciate everybody else who had something too, and we can come back afterwards. I'm going to jump back in and keep going forward because we've got a couple other spots where I had little questions in here, and I have 12 minutes. So here we go. Let's share again. Share. We're going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so I mentioned that there's actual sales involved in this too. So as much as I said, this is the way to go if you hate sales, you should understand that I have built kind of this semi-artificial line between the networking side where you don't pitch. And again, it was, Mike just demonstrated really well how you still can kind of get some of that in there, even though that isn't necessarily your intent. To the referral side, or if somebody raises their hand, where it absolutely is sales. So I guess the most important thing I wanted to point out in this slide was when you get the referral, which that's the goal, it's a totally different conversation. You can handle it in a similar way if you want and start a conversation and chat and help them. There's nothing wrong with that because they still are still on the table for doing work. However, I think that you can be way more direct with the referrals. Going into the next call number 2, you say, hey, Joe told me that you had some challenges with XYZ and thought I might be able to help you out. Tell me what's going on. I'd love to see, if there's anything that I can help you with, I'd be happy to. So that to me is jumping straight into discovery call and not relying on the networking side. Now, if you want to be more gentle, you can. And the reason I say that is because that end line that I said I always use at the end of a networking call, hey, this is my ICP, this is my ideal customer profile. Do you know somebody I could help? If there is any possibility that you will do any work with this person, regardless of whether it was a referral or not, they'll bring it up. They like every time. So as a matter of fact, I would even argue that if you spend too much time laying out exactly what it is that you do, you're actually excluding work. Whereas if you leave it wide open and you say, I'm a marketing generalist, blah, 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 or you could even have a niche, but the whole conversation is networking and is helping and kind of, they'll know that this is a tiny example of everything you can do. They're more likely to ask a question about, hey, do you do XYZ when you make that offer at the end of the call? Whereas if you line out and say, these are my 3 product services that I do, then you may have just excluded yourselves out of a lot of work. So that was my main thing on that one. This one, obviously, again, in getting your network going, it's creating new people into your network and having those conversations, doing the introductions, and then the part that I'm frankly weak at, which is nurturing those relationships as they go. This is my attempt to nurture relationships right here, me and you. So I think that could be anywhere from setting up a schedule where you're going to circle back and start a conversation up again with these same people. It could be, the weakest side of this would be like an email newsletter or something that you send out every once in a while. It needs to not be a pitch though. It needs to be, hey, this is new news in the industry that I'm hoping you will think is valuable. Or again, I'm experimenting with something like this. My goal here was to do one-to-many conversations instead of one-on-one. I'm happy to do one-on-ones, but in order to, as my network grows, in order to get more people in here, this is my experiment to see if I pull that off or not. So that was that one. So we started the conversation saying this is the talk to have with people who hate sales and don't want to do it. And yet now I'm coming back and saying, there's a little salesmanship. I've found that a lot of people feel like once the ice is broken and there is some kind of relationship, they feel much more comfortable talking about the sales side. So it's not as scary. What input would you have about the handshake between the networking where it's really hands-off sales-wise and feeling comfortable actually getting to the sales part? Or do you have any questions about how to switch between those two? Or I've got plenty of other slides and I only have 7 minutes, so it's okay. Just keep going.
Well, I would say, when it's someone and you've had interactions with over a period of time, it's much easier to like pivot into hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what I've been working on with other people, do you have anyone in your network you think could benefit from it? So that's a little salesy, right?
That's a that fits within the networking. I mean, that's pretty much exactly what I do at the end of every
Yeah.
networking call. So yeah, I agree. That is the most specific and salesy thing that I do in a pure networking call. But then there is the actual sales side where you,
I'll tell you what, I've very selectively done some cold outreach, cold pitching.
hmm
Like if there's a company that I really want to work with
hmm
and I don't have a connection there already, I've gone out and like found their chief scientific officer, chief technology officer, or CEO, and actually made a absolutely cold pitch to them. But in that pitch, I offer them like a case study, for example. I have several case studies from other companies I've worked with.
hmm
I've had some, I think about 30% warm responses to that approach.
Tell you what you're talking about is, well, it's kind of a version of account-based marketing, and I actually like it. But I would approach it slightly different. So what I would do if I had a list, and I don't want to get too far off here, but if I had a list of 30 different companies that I wanted to work with, and I didn't have connections with them, what I would do is find out which ones had decision makers that were active on LinkedIn, and then I would go on LinkedIn, and in order to not do it cold, I would first comment and interact with them on posts that they're already posting themselves. And I wouldn't even send a connection request, wouldn't send in mail, nothing. I would just communicate for a couple weeks back and forth, a couple different times on their comments. Then after that, then you send them a connection request. And I'm telling you, you know what? If you do this, if you do the comments first, and then in your connection request, you say, hey, I've enjoyed interacting with your comments in the last couple of weeks, blah, blah, blah. You will get like a 99% connection rate. And then now you start direct messaging, you start doing, and you can work right into a networking type of call from cold.
Well, and sometimes they just send me a connection request right off of the first or second comment. They're like,
Yep.
hey, I appreciate you interacting with me. I'd love to connect. So yeah,
Yep.
that's a great strategy. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so moving on here. This slide is really more about my thought process before I even started putting together how I was going to network. Because when I got to the point where I realized I'm not actually, the goal isn't to find prospects who will buy my stuff. That's not the goal anymore. The new goal is to find people I can network with who will refer me to the people who will buy my stuff. That was a sea change. Okay. So when I figured that out, then I said, okay, how do I get from zero, like someone who I had totally cold, to get them to where they trust me to give me a referral or recommendation as quickly as possible? And we've kind of touched on a bunch of things already that do that. It's the authenticity that does it. It's the professionalism that does it. It's the not pitching that does it. You would never refer someone who is a rabid car salesman on your friend. What I do, the goal is to get someone from I don't know you to you can give me a referral as quickly as possible. And I do that through LinkedIn, and I do it through the process that I'm just walking you through. And I will tell you, 95% of the time, I can get people. I'm long-winded, as you can tell, but I can get people in under an hour, and it should be a half hour, all the way through that. And it's just by being me and seeing if I can help. And you can just be you. So you don't have to worry about being me. There's enough of me already. Tactical channels. So I've been referring to LinkedIn a bunch. However, as I mentioned, this can be done in a whole lot of different ways. So this can be done in physical events. You go to shows, you go to events, same idea. LinkedIn. Again, I equate these conversations in LinkedIn, because you're not pitching, to swimming with the current instead of against it, because that's really what sales is on LinkedIn. It's not intended for sales. So you're just fighting and drowning and getting mouths full of water the whole time, instead of swimming with the stream, which is what it's intended to do for networking. One-on-ones, by far the best way to build trust. And we're experimenting right now with one on minis, which I'm hopeful about and think is a good thing to go to in the future. So I'm planning on doing 2 more in this series. The next one, I'm hoping to keep them to a half hour. The next one is going to be revisiting, because again, most of you, I've probably talked about this at least briefly, but revisiting the specific tactics that I use for doing outreach on LinkedIn. The idea is you can do it yourself. Again, this is not a pitch either. And I'll talk you through the tools and exactly how I do it and messaging and everything. And then the third one in the series is going to be talking about, well, it's more about messaging, about how to network specifically with C-level people. Those are usually people who hire people like us. And it is a little different than doing networking with other folks. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I hope you guys might think that's interesting. And hey, I got you guys out of here in a half hour. I'm happy to stick around if anybody wants to chat or have any questions. But I was really wondering if I could make it in a half hour, and I did. So
Well done.
thank you all. And I'm here. Just stick around if you want to talk.
Thanks,
Thanks for your
everybody.
time, Brian.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brian.
Brian. I'll definitely be on the next 2 calls. This was
Awesome.
good. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump to, I have another call coming up, but thanks again. Really
You got it.
appreciate it.
Bye now.
Take care.